Now it has this screen that has these three things on it. It says join audio, computer audio connected, and share screen and invite listeners. Invite others, I mean. And I don't know what to do with this.
Okay, I'm going to sign out and log in as you and start the meeting. You don't have to log out.
Okay, now it's familiar. Don't bother. Now the familiar thing is here. I don't know what happened, but there's Haima and Aaron and
Hari Om.
Good morning.
Good morning, Hari Om, Brother Shankara.
Hari Om, Hari Om. Cindy, are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna hang up so I can turn off the ringtone.
Yes, okay.
Okay, bye.
Good morning, Aima.
Hello, namaste, Naveen. Good morning.
How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good.
For those of you who have the book, we're in the very early part of the book under concepts, and the title of the talk, Swami Prabhavananda's talk, is The Practice of Religion.
Is that the name of the book, Brother Shankara?
No, the name of the book is Realizing God.
God, okay, that's right. Thank you. Namaste, Brother Shankara.
There I am.
Namaste.
Namaste, dear. I'm just busy trying to make sure everything's okay. Zoom is simple, but there's a lot of things to remember. Like I have to remember to go to the gallery view and all that stuff. So I see everybody's there. And, oh my goodness. But here we are. And I'm sure since it's still a few minutes till 11, a few more people will join us. There comes somebody. It just says iPhone. And now Neera, good. Good morning, Neera.
Good morning.
And Aaron Shippey is there. Hello, Aaron. Namaste, dear. And there's Bala Krishna ji. Hello, Bala. Good morning. Namaste. You have to unmute yourself. If we're going to hear you say anything, anyway. It says it's Liam. Hello, Liam. Namaste.
Shankaraji,
Yes, Balaji.
what topic are we reading today?
Okay, I was about to announce that, but thank you for reminding me. Of course, the book is Realizing God, collection of Swami Prabhavananda's talks. And the talk that we're taking up today is The Practice of Religion.
That is page 63.
Thank you. Hello, Peter. Namaste.
And to you, brother, and to everyone else, good day.
Keith, good morning.
Good morning.
We'll wait till 11:02 to actually start with the chant and so on, just to give those people who are just getting themselves together a chance to sign on. Good morning, Jenny. Namaste, dear.
Hello, Brother Shankara.
Good morning, dear. Good morning. And there's Justine. Good morning. Namaste, Justine. Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Brother Shankara, what does Om Namah Shivaya mean?
Salutations to the great name of Shiva.
Gotcha.
And to the great being of Shiva. Okay, just before we start with the chant, I'll say again, the book is Realizing God, a collection of Swami Prabhavananda's talks. And we're on page, I think you said, Balakrishna ji, 63, The Practice of Religion. The Practice of Religion. For those of you who don't know, you can download a Kindle copy of this if you like to follow along that way.
Is it entitled Concepts Religion? Is that the title of the?
No, the Practice of Religion. The Practice of Religion.
Okay.
It's under concepts. It's in that section on concepts, yes. All right, it being 11:02, we'll start.
Brother Shankara.
Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. So, good morning and namaste, everyone. Thanks for joining us. The practice of religion, a talk given by Swami Prabhavananda more than once over many years. Religion has to be made living. We must live the ideal that Christ lived. It is not only possible for a Christ to achieve that end, it is just as possible for every human being on earth. Now, this seems a startling statement, that it's possible for everyone on earth, until we take seriously a testimony of Meister Eckhart, a saint. And Meister Eckhart said, God is indivisible. So there's no limit, as Swami Vivekananda pointed out, to what you become. It is just a matter of your giving way to that ache for liberation, for freedom, for being the very highest you can be. And so when the Swami says, it is not only possible for a Christ to achieve that end, it is just as possible for every human being on earth. That is the truth, it is the ideal, and it is for us to yearn for that. The yearning is called mumukshutvam in Sanskrit. It is the root of spiritual progress. That giving way to that ache, that feeling of being caged, of being limited, and the ache that being shackled that way brings about, giving way to that ache and saying, there must be more, there must be more. All right. The Swami said, one time I asked an illumined soul, what is religion? He answered, to make the lips and the mind one and the same. In other words, what we say about the world and ourselves, and what we believe about ourselves, and what we think about the world, make those one and the same. When they are one and the same, then we see clearly where we are and how to move forward from there. When there's any shade of hypocrisy or self-deception, which of course is the nature of Maya, self-deception, delusion. So this is a very profound statement to say, making the lips and the mind the same. We mustn't just think this is a good idea. We mustn't just hold these as thoughts in our minds, as something we have learned. As this title of the talk says, this is the practice of religion. We achieve things. We work tremendously. We devote our whole lives to attaining something. And then what happens? We close our eyes for good. In other words, we pass away from this body. Then what do our achievements amount to? Nothing. So the Swami was always saying, you can put all your efforts into the worldly and you can achieve much. And ultimately it amounts to, as he just said, nothing. Or you can take that same energy, that same commitment, and put it into the spiritual, your spiritual efforts. And that same commitment, that same energy, that same yearning will achieve much. What do our achievements amount to at death? Nothing. If we do not strive to reach union with the Godhead in this very life, Our existence is wasted away in the vanities of life. Vain is everything. As Ezekiel said, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. But then everything takes on a new life, as it were, if we understand the goal and we strive to reach that goal. Everything takes on a new life. Life is different. If we change the way we see, if we change the way we think, things really do change for us. What is good and what is evil? If any action makes you forget God, that action has no value. Again, a very strong statement. That action has no value. The Swami doesn't mean in an absolute sense. He means that it'll have some value in a relative sense, but it will have, I mean, he does speak in the absolute sense. The action has some value in a relative sense, but that action has no value in an absolute sense, in the face of your death, for example. But your activity helps you to unite with, but if your activity helps you to unite with God, then that action is good. And as we know, there are the 4 yogas for us to practice that allow us slowly and slowly to attune all our actions and all our thoughts toward that goodness. If your activity helps you to unite with God, then that action is good. You see, the whole of life takes a new form. There comes an actual transformation. As Sri Ramakrishna used to say, add zeros to one another and they are valueless. Put 1 first and the value of each 0 increases. So if we're adding valueless to valueless to valueless to valueless, it amounts to nothing. But if we put the 1 in front, first and foremost, then the value increases. Life is empty and 0 without that 1. If you forget that 1, if you forget that God, all your achievements and activities in life amount to nothing. Now, they will seem to amount to something before you die, but just visualize, as Don Juan Matu said, just visualize your death just over your left shoulder. You don't know when that death will tap you. And right now, in the current pandemic situation, this is a reality that we can face even more clearly and immediately than we might otherwise. In the face of your death, when you pass away from this body, you know perfectly well that you will continue to exist. If you think about yourself, if you just think, do I really believe this that I am dies? No, we don't really believe that. That's why we act as if we aren't going to die. But if we put that in our minds and then say, this will not die, but everything that this achieves in a worldly sense will just pass away as soon as this body is finished. All our achievements and activities in worldly life amount to nothing. People try to forget by getting intoxicated. And there are so many ways to get intoxicated, as we know. Doesn't just mean by alcohol. There are many ways to be drunk. People try to forget by getting intoxicated, but that forgetfulness does not last long. There is a beautiful aphorism in Patanjali. Nature is for the soul, not the soul for nature. I'll repeat it. Nature, that which we experience in time, space, and causation, all of it, without exception. Nature is for the soul, not the soul for nature. Swami Vivekananda said, the bee came to suck the honey, but its feet got stuck in the honey. We came to experience the glory and the wonder of the divine, and we got hypnotized by Maya. The bee came to suck the honey, but its feet got stuck in the honey. Instead of enjoying this world, we are enjoyed by the world. We become a slave to our idea of the world. As Don Juan Matus pointed out, we have this membership that we learn as a child, and we are a slave to that membership. Instead of enjoying this world, we are enjoyed by this world. My master, by that Swami Prabhavananda meant Swami Brahmananda, the spiritual son of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. My master used to say, they talk about enjoyment, but who can really enjoy this world? Can the brute enjoy the world? It is only a God that can enjoy life. Be a God. Then only can you enjoy the world. And I'll remind you that the Swami said at the very beginning of this talk that this is attainable for each and every one of us. It's not something that, and this is the testimony of saint after saint. The saints say, just listen to me. I'll reach across the many years since I wrote these words or said these words. I'll reach across those years and will touch your heart and help awaken it. This is what is meant by an illumined soul, a saint. An illumined soul does not run away from the world, but lives in the world and works for the good of all. And if you read their testimony in books such as Love Poems for God, you'll see that's exactly what they do. An illumined soul does not run away from the world, but lives in the world and works for the good of all. Though living in the world, such a person is not of it. There is the illustration of a lotus leaf. You pour water on it, but the water cannot make the leaf wet. The lotus stays in water, but the water does not attach itself to the leaf. It is the same with the illumined soul. Sri Ramakrishna used to use the example of the mudfish. The mudfish is a kind of fish that that can live both in and out of the water and swims in the mud, in the mud at the bank of the river, moves through that. It's an amphibian. The mud, though it swims in the mud does not attach itself to it. It does not become muddy by being in the mud. So the illumined soul, he said, is like that mudfish. The Divine Mother Durga, the mother of the universe, has two children, Kartika and Ganesha. Kartika is outgoing and is the god of worldly success and prosperity. He is also the god of warriors. Ganesha is contemplative. His mind is inward, devoted to the Divine Mother. One day, the mother held a treasure, a necklace, before them and announced, "Whoever goes around the universe speedily and comes back to me first will receive this treasure of a necklace." Kartika immediately flew around the universe. Of course, he was confident that he was the one who would get the treasure. Ganesha took his time, slowly going around the mother. He got up and walked around the mother, simply circumambulated her form. Ganesha took his time, slowly going around the mother and bowing down to her. Mother gave him the treasure of a necklace. And when Kartika came back, he saw Ganesha wearing the necklace. This legend is symbolic. Please remember that both of them are children of the Divine Mother. So this is not to disparage Kartika. As Sri Ramakrishna said to the gentleman from Calcutta who came and challenged him about renunciation and said, why should we not enjoy the world? He said, go enjoy the world. I have no objection. But when you are sick of it, return to me. I'd have the cure. So the Swami reminds us that both of these, Kartika and Ganesha, are children of the Divine Mother. I'd say that Kartika represents time and technology, and Ganesha represents religion or spiritual life. Kartika probes into the outer universe. Ganesha probes into the inner universe. Exemplars who probe the inner universe are not wanting. No, they're not. There are so many wonderful saints across the ages. Exemplars who probe the inner universe are not wanting. There have been great spiritual giants in every religion. They have cleared a path for us. They really have too. You read their writings and they say, look, I've pushed this all out of the way. Just come, follow, just get right behind me, or take my arm, or take my hand. There have been great spiritual giants in every religion. They have cleared a path for us. We have only to follow it. Now, of course, in order to follow, we must know what the goal of life actually is. I think every one of us, if we just sit quietly and let our mind become calm, we sense what the goal of life is. It is freedom, freedom from this imprisonment, freedom from this sense of being caged, of being bound by this and by that, and by the other thing. So we know what the goal of life actually is. Is it the acceptance of certain dogmas, beliefs, and doctrines? Is it to, in other words, the membership that we're offered? Is it the acceptance of certain dogmas, beliefs, and doctrines? Is it to go out and do something? Can we do good to the world only with our hands and feet? These are things to consider. No. We do good to the world if we concentrate on the goal of life and just become radiant beings. Just become radiant beings, radiating that truth that we learn more and more deeply as we practice spiritual life. Can we do good to the world only with our hands and feet? Yes, we can do good to the world with our hands and feet, but not only that. As a matter of fact, Swami Vivekananda says, and Swami Prabhavananda is saying to us here, that what we do just by being true to these ideals and being radiant is perhaps even more powerful. Spiritual life or spiritual pursuit is not blind and purposeless. It is not something to achieve in the next life. It has a specific end and definite goal to be attained here and now, not after the death of the body. As a matter of fact, as Sri Krishna points out in the Gita, this spiritual life and the practice is very much a preparation for properly leaving the body so that we are not bound to take another one. Spiritual life has a specific and definite goal to be attained here and now, not after the death of the body. So the spiritual aspirant, here comes a very potent instruction for each and every one of us. So the spiritual aspirant must think clearly and definitely and understand that goal, for only then will the pursuit of spiritual life be serious and meaningful as the fulfillment of one's life. So when we hold to the goal, when we think clearly and keep firmly in mind day to day, this is the goal. I may need to do these other things. I may do these other things successfully. I may even achieve worldly success. All of that being relative and having its relative importance. But what is the real goal? When we understand that goal, then the pursuit of spiritual life can be serious and meaningful as the fulfillment of one's life. And fulfillment comes when we realize the eternal, the unchangeable reality amongst the non-eternals of life. When we realize the eternal, the unchangeable reality amongst the non-eternals of life. When we attain that highest abiding joy in the midst of fleeting pleasures of life. We all know what the Swami means by fleeting pleasures. Now let me tell you what he means by the word fleeting and what a pleasure is in that sense. He said, desire is nothing more than a restlessness of the mind. So when we fix that desire on some pleasure and we achieve that pleasure for a moment, for a few moments, the mind becomes calm because that has been achieved there. That pleasure is there. What is that pleasure? That pleasure is that infinite joy that is always there, masked by our distractions, the restlessness of the mind. So this is what's meant by a fleeting pleasure. The pleasure is always there. The joy, the bliss is always there, masked by our distraction, our restlessness. So when we satisfy that restlessness for a moment, the pleasure emerges. The artesian spring is uncovered in that moment. And pleasure, bliss flows out. But then very quickly our mind goes back to being restless because it's not the eternal. It's not the changeless that we have found. It is something that comes and goes, that arises and goes away. When we realize the unchangeable, the eternal reality amongst the non-eternals of life, when we attain that highest abiding joy in the midst of the fleeting pleasures of life, where is it? It is all within ourselves. There is no place else for us. Even the us is an idea that we hold. Even the separation, all these names on the screen here, all of that is an appearance. We are behind that reality, non-separate. Behind that lower, lesser reality, we are non-separate. And it is that the eternal and the changeless is within each one of us. As the seers of the Upanishads point out, I have known that truth, Svetasvatara Upanishad. I have known that truth. They also tell us, Ye also shall know the truth. Then only can you attain freedom and immortality. Just to remind us, the word immortality, it means not being mortal, not having a body, not being in a mortal frame. You can take a mortal frame and still be immortal. That is to say, if you know it, if you are that. This is what all of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples did. They came with him, as he said, as a band of minstrels. But they were, and always are, immortal. They are not bound to a body. In the Upanishads, again, we read, Brahman may be realized while yet living in this ephemeral body. Brahman may be realized while yet living in this ephemeral body. To fail to realize him is to live in ignorance and therefore to be subject to birth and death, to mortality. The knowers of Brahman are immortal. Others, knowing him not, continue in the bonds of grief. This is in the Great Forest Upanishad, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The Great Forest Upanishad, the reason it's called that is because it tells the story of many sages who lived in those days in the forest. The Great Forest contained many sages, and of course the Great Forest is also the forest of the world, of the universe. Knowers of Brahman are immortal. Others, knowing him not, continue in the bonds of grief, samsara. Constantly reaching and not quite grasping the ephemeral, that which arises and goes away. Those who claim to have known God, seen God, had the direct experience of God, are very few in any age. That doesn't mean they're inaccessible to you. Their writings are there. If you take to reading those rather than other kinds of things, they lift you up, they inspire you, they touch you. That is their expressed intent. I've come to do this, they say. I've come across all these years to touch you in this moment. They're very few in any age, but by the grace of the divine, they are collected together in the Upanishads, in the Gita, in books such as Love Poems from God, the testimony of the saints. How can we convince ourselves that they are not deluded? Maybe Christ was deluded. Ramakrishna was deluded. They were insane, perhaps. So how can we convince ourselves that that they're not insane? But look at their lives, their character, pure. Look at the power behind them. A majority does not prove the truth. In other words, the fact that most people don't believe in Krishna, in Christ, in Ramakrishna. Just the fact that they are deluded, that they can't see clearly what they're looking at, doesn't prove the truth. Though a majority can elect a president, a majority cannot elect God or diselect God, impeach God. You can say God is dead, and as someone remarked at the time that was a popular thing in society, I don't think I've ever heard God laugh so loud. The fact is that they are the majority because very few want that. Now, is this an indictment? let's hear what the master says. What Swami Prabhupada. My master once said, people's minds are busy with many things, with trivial things. People's minds are busy with trivial things. Who wants the real treasure? Now, he wasn't condemning these people. It is natural for our minds to be occupied by trivial things. We are trained to it as children. Just think what you were trained to as a child, what was presented to you as the most important. We're trained to be distracted and occupied with trivial things. Who wants the real treasure? He also said, we have the treasure to offer, but people come to get potatoes and onions and eggplants. Now, what does he mean? We have the treasure. In another context, it said we have the key to the treasure box. We have the treasure. That is Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual treasure. He gathered together that treasure over the period of his sadhana. He gathered it together for one reason and one reason only. All thine austerities were practiced for our sake. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. That's the treasure that Brahmananda is asking, is mentioning. We have the treasure to offer. But people come to get potatoes and onions and eggplants. What? What does he mean? Mo, please get my daughter a good marriage. And there's nothing wrong with asking a saint to help you get your daughter a good marriage. Please help my son pass this examination. Nothing wrong with that. Please let me be free from this illness. Nothing wrong with that. It's just we're asking for something that will be consumed and go away. We have the treasure to offer, but people come to get potatoes and onions and eggplants. They can manage to do all kinds of worldly works, but when it comes to spiritual effort, they say, where is the time? Where is the time for it? Buddha called this laziness and the greatest sin. Buddha said, if there is a sin, it is laziness. And so this is what the Swami means. Buddha called this laziness and the greatest sin. We all feel that ache. We all know that we strain against our sense of being bound, our sense of being imprisoned. We all want true happiness. Are we willing to break the expectations of our membership, of that which we were born into and trained to? Are we willing to be self-determined enough to say, I know there's more, and I don't care what the world says about me. I'm going to do that. You have to have, now again, here's another instruction from the Swami. You have to have what we call viveka, or discrimination. You have to consider that no matter how your mind runs after worldly things, and that is natural, God is the only treasure which no moth can eat, as Jesus says. You know, precious garments made of silk and wool are eaten by moths. God is the only treasure which no moth can eat, as Jesus says. He is the one treasure. He is the one treasure. And the thing about this, you know, we think of one treasure one treasure being something that's limited. As a matter of fact, what the truth is that when one discovers this treasure, one finds that it is unlimited in every direction. And each one of us, being a unique being, will find our own wonders and glories in that divine treasure, perhaps that no one else has ever discovered. That's why Mozart could write the music that he wrote. That's why Shakespeare could write the plays that he wrote. That's why so many saints have been who they've been, because they refused the limitation and made the effort to become one with that which has no end, no limit. And at the same time, you have to convince yourself, and at the same time, you have to convince yourself, in spite of your tendencies for worldly things, that, and here's a quote from Hamlet, Shakespeare, you have to convince yourself, in spite of your tendencies for worldly things, that, quote, flat, tame, and unprofitable are the uses of the world, as Shakespeare writes in Hamlet. You have to come to that understanding. Flat, tame, and unprofitable are the uses of the world, as Shakespeare writes in Hamlet. You have to come to that understanding. Before we can understand what is meant by the practice of religion, we must try to understand what the purpose of living is, what the meaning of this human life is. The answer is difficult to find independently of one the answer is difficult to find independently of one who has had the illumined knowledge of the truth of God. Which is why I've been harping on the idea of listening to the saints, listening to the testimony of the saints. If you do, and you do it regularly, in whatever way you find it, in song, in verse, in sermons of Meister Eckhart that you can find online, you slowly and slowly, by your manana, by thinking about these things and comparing them with what they're saying life is, with the way you're living life, the way you're actually thinking and behaving, the truth will triumph. The truth will be stronger. But it means that you have to be somewhat relentless in this pursuit. You can't do it one day a week and devote the rest of the week to, you can't be a Sunday Christian, in other words. You have to take this up as something. I've seen that there's something. We can't be like that person that Winston Churchill remarked on. Many people stumble over the truth and then get up and walk on as if nothing had happened. We can't be that person. So it is easy to find when one finds the illumined, those who have had the illumined knowledge of the truth of God. The answer is difficult to find independently of one who has had the illumined knowledge of the truth of God. If you analyze, this is what manana is. If you analyze, you find that today you seek for this, another day for that. In other words, the aimlessness that Krishna speaks about in chapters 2 and 3 of the Gita. The mind just wanders here and there looking for this and that, being restless. Hopeless condition, as Swami Chitananda says. You find that today you seek for this, another day for that. You are not sure. You seek for pleasures, happiness, and things like that, but how to find it and what the goal is, we do not know. And this is why it's so good for us to keep in mind, as Swami Prabhavananda said, desire, the fact of desire is nothing more than a restlessness of the mind. The mind is restless to be free of its bondage. But because of our training to it, we think we're going to find it in this ephemeral pleasure and that. We don't know how to find it. We don't know what the goal is. We just don't know. If we go to the scriptures or to the words of those who are illumined, by this he means the saints. If we go to the scriptures or to the words of those who are illumined, who have known the meaning of life, it is pointed out to us that there are 4 pursuits of life: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. The meaning of dharma is the formation of character. Excuse me. The meaning of dharma is the formation of character. We have within us both good and bad tendencies, and we have to live in such a way that a greater emphasis is given to the good tendencies. This is exactly what is described in some loving detail in Swami Prabhavananda's book, How to Know God, in his description of the yamas. The yamas are the restraints, the replacement of the lower tendencies with good tendencies. You see, every person is born with a character. A child has a character, and there are both good and bad tendencies. The child must be taught to live and act in such a way that the good tendencies develop. The character is to be formed by good deeds and pure thoughts. Okay, now the training of restraint is one thing. Then what if we restrain the bad tendencies and replace them with good tendencies? What forms the character? The character is formed by good deeds and pure thoughts. That means selfless action. And of course, these are the niyamas. These are the observances that replace that which we are restraining. We replace that. The character is to be formed by good deeds and pure thoughts. And that means selfless action. One time, Swami Vivekananda said to his brother disciples, "Whatever you do for yourself is not religion. Whatever you do for others is religion." Now, does that mean you shouldn't have good food to eat? No, it does not mean you shouldn't have good food to eat. Does it mean that you shouldn't have something nice to wear? No, it does not mean that. Does it mean you should live in a hovel? No, you should have a nice house. But you have to understand that all of those are just something that is giving you a reasonable, decent life until you pass away from the body. That's not religion. Nothing about that is religion. Whatever you do for yourself is not religion. Whatever you do for others is religion. What is the most potent thing that we can do for others? To become closer and closer to that spiritual ideal, to become radiant, to ultimately become, as the Swami said, is possible for each one of us, to ultimately become saintly. That is the very best thing we can do for the world. We can do things with our hands and our feet. We can do things with our green energy, our money, and so on. All of that's wonderful. And all of that is an aspect of religion, particularly karma yoga. But as long as our motives for doing it are pure. So that is the first thing you have to understand, that you have to form a character that is selfless. You have to form a character that is selfless. Does that happen overnight? No, it does not. It happens through daily practice of the yamas and niyamas. It happens through the daily practice of the 10 Commandments, of the teachings of the great saints. So Dharma is not something that you wear like a garment. Dharma is something that develops in you from inside and slowly transforms everything you are on the outside. Then again, you can't live on character. So there is the pursuit of economic freedom, artha. As Swami Vivekananda said, first bread. You have to have economic freedom. You cannot be imprisoned by constant concern. There is no religion on an empty stomach, as the aphorism says. So you have to be. So then again, you can't live on character, so there is the pursuit of economic freedom, artha. But the pursuit is not for the sake of economic freedom in itself, but for something very great. The selfless. Economic is not for itself, but for something very great. The selfless character you try to form is not the end, but is a means to something higher. The first stage is known as brahmacharya, student life, in which the individual learns to acquire dharma, a character with good tendencies, along with knowledge, learning. So then you have the tools for economic freedom. Next comes married life and the pursuit of economic freedom and the satisfaction of legitimate desires. The third stage of life is retirement. And in the last stage of life, one renounces everything and becomes completely dedicated to God. Now, Sri Ramakrishna was telling everyone who would listen, go from dharma to moksha. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, as Jesus said. The great teachers always tell us this. Don't necessarily entangle yourself with the worldly before you have attained the knowledge of God. So Sri Ramakrishna used to teach, go from the first stage of life to the fourth stage of life. Attain God. Then, he said, dance for all you're worth, holding on to the post, holding on to the central pillar of your knowledge of God. And that's exactly what Christ said too. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong in taking this other path. It's just a longer, slower path. But if you're capable of it, go from 1 to 4. First stage of life, student life, getting the tools, then married life, then retirement, vanaprashta, and then moksha. So if you can, go from 1 to 4 and minimize the others. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, return to whatever you wish to in life. Once you have the knowledge of God, then you can do whatever it is that is your swadharma. And you can dance for all you're worth, but you will dance as an expert dancer. And in the last stage of life, one renounces everything and completely dedicates, is completely dedicated to God. As a general rule, One has to pass through all these stages and ultimately renounce everything. The ultimate ideal is complete detachment and renunciation. But in order to achieve that, you have to learn such detachment and devotion to God, beginning with life as a student. So Swami is beginning to talk about going from 1 to 4 here. The ultimate ideal is complete detachment and renunciation. But in order to achieve that, you have to learn such detachment and devotion to God, beginning with life as a student. Gradually, those virtues grow and culminate when you are completely absorbed in God. Now, generally, there are these 4 stages of life, but it is said that no matter in what stage you may be, student or householder or retiree, any moment that great dispassion possesses you, any moment that great dispassion possesses you, you take to the last stage of life, moksha, liberation, freedom, true happiness. So it can happen for you at any time. You can renounce at any moment in life. The highest goal, therefore, is what we call moksha, which is liberation from the bondages of birth, death, and rebirth. The Hindu and Buddhist idea of the law of karma and reincarnation is that one passes through birth, death, and rebirth many times over. And if you want to read a beautiful evocation of this, read the last few pages, the last maybe 4, 5, 6 pages of Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. He writes of this so beautifully and so poetically. So the Hindu and Buddhist idea of the law of karma and reincarnation is that one passes through birth, death, and rebirth many times over. According to what one sows, one reaps. The law of karma is working in everyone's life. And liberation means to be free from that and to attain immortality. To be free from having to be mortal and to attain immortality. Generally, the idea is that immortality means continuity of existence. Even what you call matter continues to exist in some form or another. Because nothing in this world is destroyed or lost. But immortality does not mean that. In every religion, immortality is something you have to attain. In the Svatasvatara Upanishad, there is a verse which says that this vast universe is a wheel going round and round, and all creatures are within this wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. As long as you consider yourself separate from the Atman, from God, so long you go round this wheel. But the moment you realize and experience that you are the Atman, one with Brahman, the moment you unite yourself with God, you are free and attain immortality. Now, it is the subtle body, the mind, the intellect, the bliss body or causal body that reincarnates. So that's not what's meant by immortality. Yes, you can go on doing that millions of times. That's not immortality. You're still mortal, even though it's in a subtle form rather than in a gross form. Immortality means that you are no longer bound by the gunas to take another subtle and gross body. You may, through the desire to serve, as Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples came with him, as I said earlier, as a band of minstrels. You may do that, but it is not compulsory. It is out of love for the divine being and the desire to serve their purpose of freeing others. Swami Vivekananda said, each soul is potentially divine. Mind you, he said potentially. He says potentially. It has to be manifested. If we don't know what a battery is, a car battery, if we just didn't know what that was, we would have no idea there was energy in that battery. It has to be manifested. Somebody has to tell us, oh, there's energy in that. You connect up something here and something there, and you'll see there's energy there. That's what's meant by potential. The potential for our divinity is within us. We have to make those connections that show us that that energy of divinity is there. It has to be manifested. And the goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature. You remember what the definition of nature is: anything that we can experience in time, space, and causation. It is for the purpose of the soul, not the soul for it. And the goal is to manifest this with this divinity within by controlling nature. In other words, since nature is for the soul, exerting that control to manifest this divinity within by controlling nature, external and internal. Do this either by work or worship or psychic control, meaning meditation, or philosophy. By one or more or all of these, and be free. This is the whole of religion. And we all should just do our manana on that. This is the whole of religion. Doctrines or dogmas or rituals or books or temples or forms are but secondary details. These are the elements of our membership. All of those secondary details, doctrines, dogmas, rituals, books, temples, forms, secondary details. It may be a very noble membership, but it is not the truth. It is not the truth of our divine nature. This is the substance of what religion means. So what is meant by controlling nature? We identify ourselves with nature. In other words, we make ourselves cooperative with nature. As a matter of fact, through what we learn, we enslave ourselves to nature. We identify ourselves with the nature. For instance, I begin to feel this desk is mine and I have a right to it. What does that mean? The desk now owns him. If it's mine and I have a right to it, suddenly the relationship is reversed. The desk, I don't own the desk owns me. I would feel like I've lost something if I lost the desk. That I have a right to it. This house is mine. It belongs to me. I possess it. I identify myself with external nature or internal or inner nature in the mind. I identify myself with the external nature or inner nature in the mind, which is subject to the gunas. One time it is calm, another time it is restless or passionate, Again, it is lethargic. I identify myself with the moods of the mind, whereas my true nature is Atman, divine. So we have to control external and internal nature by realizing our true being. Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda and all the disciples of Ramakrishna placed before us an ideal which is not one-sided, but which combines all four yogas in one life. So that was the summary that Swami Vivekananda gave us. Work, or worship, or psychic control, or philosophy, one or more, or all of these. In other words, you have to be active as well as meditative, to be devotional as well as philosophical. People think they have to work out their karma, but you can never work out your karma. The harder you work at working out your karma, the more karma you store up. You see, every time you work, you're acting and creating new karmas. It is a chain because it is a chain of cause and effect. The effect becomes the cause, and again there is the effect. And so it goes on and on, there is no end. But when you attain the knowledge of Brahman, then the law of karma can no longer attach itself to you. If you have done awful deeds and suddenly illumination comes, you are freed from all that. The effects will not hurt you. And you've heard it said from here, you've heard it said by others if you've listened to them, that Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna, for that matter, Jesus, Krishna and the Gita have all said, when you practice religion as it is defined here, your karmas will not affect you in the way they would have otherwise affected you. As Mother said, if you were to have a wound as big as a plowshare, now you can imagine a plow, the tip of a plow gashing you. If you were to have a wound as big as a plowshare, that will not happen. And the disciples said, what, nothing will happen? And she said, well, something must happen, so you will receive a pinprick. This is the promise. So there's no reason to be afraid or concerned about our karma. Turn away from that which creates karma, and the karma is powerless over you. If you have done awful deeds and suddenly illumination comes, and it can come at any moment for any of us if we're making the effort, it is not within our grasp like earning a doctorate or something like that. It is something that we don't know all of the many things that are working within us to give us that suddenly illumination. And suddenly illumination comes, you are freed from all that. The effects will not hurt you. But understanding the ideal is not enough. There are three things necessary for liberation. The first two are human birth and the desire for liberation. The first two graces, human birth and the desire for liberation, for the knowledge of Brahman, for attaining union with God. You have to have longing for it, mumukshutva. When Sri Ramakrishna was asked how to know God, his answer word was, intensely long for him. If you do that, the path becomes clear. That longing does not come all at once, but even a slight desire can be intensified. So don't worry if you're not fully in that stage of passionate longing. Ah, how I long for the day when an instant's separation from the Yoga Bindu will be as 1,000 years. This is the plea of the devotee. Let that happen. Let that happen. Even the slight desire can be intensified. The third condition is association with a holy personality. Now, association with a holy personality can come through reading, through listening to YouTube videos. We have the rare opportunities from time to time to be in the company of the holy, Swami Sarvadevananda, Swami Yogatmananda, Swami Chandrasekharananda, and so on. But we can be in association with the holy by reading books too and by listening to those videos. In the Gita we read, these illumined oh, it's doing that thing of going backwards. These illumined souls who have realized the truth will instruct you in the knowledge of Brahman if you prostrate before them, question them, and serve them as disciples, as a disciple, and serve them as a disciple. To prostrate means to listen to the truth taught by the teacher eagerly. To question means to reason upon the teaching and ask about it. Otherwise, you won't understand. In other words, do your manana. Oh my goodness, it's afternoon. I notice a couple of people have had to leave. And to serve the guru means following the teachings and to meditate. What is the practice really? There are two aspects. One is called negative, the other positive. They are both important. Purification of the heart and meditation upon God, love for God, devotion to God. St. Augustine said, you must have steadfast self-discipline and cleansing of the soul. You have to discipline yourself. You see, I make a rule that you must go to the shrine and meditate for so many hours. But how shall you know what you are doing? You have to discipline yourself. So when Swami Prabhavananda was saying this, he was talking to his disciples in the temple there in Hollywood. Many of them were his disciples. And he says, you see, I make a rule that you must go to the shrine and meditate for so many hours. But how shall I know what you are doing? And not how will you know, but how shall I know what you are doing? You have to discipline yourself. In other words, the Swami won't know whether you're spending those hours or not. You have to discipline yourself. And what does purification of the heart mean? Thinking of God without any distractions, without desires, cravings, or ambitions. There is a prayer we chant every morning. Ah, how I long for the day when an instant separation from the Yoga Bindu will be as 1,000 years, when my heart burns away with its desire, and the world without thee is a heartless void. That's from Chaitanya's prayer. Any of you who would like to have a copy of that prayer, just send me an email, a text. I'll be happy to send you a copy of it. It's best to email me because then I can respond by email and attach a PDF copy. We have to pray earnestly. We have to pray earnestly that the heart may be cleansed and fixed in the Lord. We have to feel that everything without him has no sense or meaning. Now, in the beginning, we take a stand for that. Of course, our lives are not going to change overnight. We're going to continue to have our habits, our predilections, our tendencies. But we can feel that anything without the Lord has no sense or meaning, even if we go ahead and do things that we know in reality have no sense or meaning. And so the Swami says, how do we get from here to there? Practice, practice, practice. We forget, then again remember. Whatever we hear, every sound is Brahman. Deify everything. Now again, there has to be philosophy. We must learn to discriminate between the eternal and the non-eternal. We have to realize, to feel that God alone is real. There is the world, there are duties and friends and relatives, but they all have meaning only because of God. And to know what's meant by that, you can read what the sage Yajnavalkya says in the Great Forest Upanishad, the Brihadranya Upanishad, about the fact that we're only drawn to anything because it is a container for the self. And that's what the Swami means here. All of these things, duties, relatives, friends, they have meaning only because of God. They are containers for the self. And all passes away except God. In him again, you find everything, everybody. Be devoted to God and meditate upon God. It doesn't matter if you believe in God with form or without form. Have some ideal, whatever appeals to you. There are different ways to meditate according to any aspect or ideal, but there is my point. No matter how you worship God, but there is my point. No matter how you worship God, it does not make any difference what your conception of God is. Meditate upon that. God sees your heart. In other words, whatever you are doing, if it's sincere and persistent, it will attract God's attention. Whatever you may be conceiving, he reveals himself to you as he is in reality. Whatever you may be conceiving, he reveals himself to you as he is in reality. That is your only way of knowing. That is your only way of knowing God. We cannot conceive exactly of what is beyond thought, beyond comprehension. But try to comprehend. Try to think of them in your own childish way. And I wish that the Swami had used childlike rather than childish. Try to think of him in your own childlike way. He will reveal himself to you as he is. So that concludes the talk. Because of all the interpolations, we ran over the hour. I'm glad that you stayed. And are there any questions, any comments? This is the part where we practice this together, where we where we learn the art of spirituality by practicing it together. So any comments, questions, please.
Namaste, Brother Shankar.
Yes, Aaron.
So can we use the practice of going to sleep if we practice chants or contemplating on the divine during this process? Is that sort of like a practice for the moment of death?
Say the first part again. When we go to sleep, is that what you said?
Yes.
Oh, yes, by all means. As a matter of fact, Swami Swahananda once said, with humor, but he meant it very much. If you go to sleep thinking of God or chanting your mantra, you get credit for the whole night. You get karmic credit for the whole night. So yes, by all means, as you're going to sleep, hold these thoughts. And if you have a mantra or a prayer, repeat it as you're going to sleep. And as you go to sleep, Swami Prabhavananda said, Swami Swahananda said, you'll get credit for the whole night. Anyone else?
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
this is Kaima.
Yes, Haima.
I just wanted to make a comment when you said go from dharma to moksha and seek kingdom of God. By Jesus said, seek kingdom of God.
Seek
And
ye first the kingdom.
Leo Tolstoy wrote a book called The Kingdom of God is Within You. It's a great book to read.
Thank you.
Just wanted to share that piece.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate
Everything was so much wisdom you read today. It was so wonderful too.
Swami Prabhavananda was the real thing. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Haima. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a minute about when you asked the question, are they insane? Because that's become a big question for me. When there's a passage in the Gospel according to Thomas, in which Christ said, do not leave off seeking until you find. And when you find, you will be disturbed and you will marvel. You will be disturbed and you will marvel. So I find that when I practice my sadhana regularly and I'm deep into it, as reality begins to change in ways that are unexpected, I tend to become disturbed. And I begin to question, am I insane? And then I tend to retreat back into the world a little bit out of that feeling of being disturbed. And then what I see is a world that is far more disturbing than the spiritual reality I was experiencing. I look at the political divisiveness. I look at the insane leaders we have in power right now. Then I look at the opposition, and I look the way this Biden-Bernie nonsense going back and forth. And I look at just the madness of all this continuing to go on while we're in a pandemic, when we should all be pulling together. And I feel more and more and more in line with what Krishnamurti said, which is, it is no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And then I begin to realize the insanity is not my moments of sadhana, not my moments of realization. It is not, the moments of samadhi that these great, teachers went into. It's the world that is surrounding them that is insane. It's far more insane than even the deepest of spiritual realities. I'm sorry, that's all.
Sri Ramakrishna said, we are all mad. We're all mad for something, for family, for money, for fame. He said, be mad for God. And so you're absolutely right. Christ did say you will be disturbed. And we have to remember that even the saints, each one of them go through a period where they go through, including Sri Ramakrishna, where they question their sanity. So very good discrimination that you just described, Justine. You look at the quality of the madness or the disturbance that you find in your sadhana, and then you look outside at the world and you say, oh my God, what I find in my sadhana is much more reasonable, even though it's so different, it is so much more reasonable than the insanity that we're surrounded with. And indeed, we are surrounded with insanity. The world is in a great transformation right now, and there is a lot of insanity. Thank you, Justine.
Shankara?
Yes.
Cindy. I just wanted to say amen to what Justine was saying. And we do, the more we practice and have results from it, the more the rest of the world does seem insane. And sometimes that's really difficult because it makes us feel isolated and alone. It's like, oh gosh, yes, the world is insane. It wasn't me, it was the world. But I've gotten to the point where, at least most of the time, I can look at the world and say it's just unbelievably insane, but that is its nature. And my nature is what I feel when I, do my practice and I'm in that space where I feel connected with the divine. And they both coexist. I wish I could wave the magic wand and or bottle up what it is I get in meditation and share, dump it on the rest of the world. But that's the nature of Maya. The nature of the world is like that. And we don't have to get dragged into it.
No,
We can observe it. We can pray for people, but not get
hooked, not get entangled.
hooked. Yeah. That's it.
So yes, the divine and its representatives are a refuge from the insanity, and it is an adjustment to become part of that rather than part of the world. There's no two ways about it. And it happens, as Swami Sridharananda said, slowly and slowly, my dears. Don't be impatient. Thank you, Cindy.
Brother
Shankara?
Yes.
I would just like to say also that we should always try to remember that the world is God as well.
Yes, yes.
And even the people that we think are so wrong are the divine.
Yes. You're absolutely right, Jenny. We mustn't be judgmental, because otherwise we just create separation, and separation is not the nature of reality. You're absolutely right. But that doesn't keep us from observing,
right,
without judging, observing the insanity of what we're seeing and experiencing. But thank you. You're absolutely right. We must not create separation by thinking that is something other than God.
And also this is part of divine order also.
Yes.
It's something that's separate from God.
It's not something separate from God. This is God. What is happening is universe itself in transformation. I mean, Ishvara, the God made manifest, does change, and sometimes in very convulsive ways. If you read some of the things that Jesus said that he was bringing to the world, I bring the fire and the sword. He is trampling out the vintage where his grapes of wrath are stored, or she. So yes, it's not separate. It is that which, and we can take comfort in that as long as we don't get entangled. Thank you, Jenny. That was very good. Anybody else? Anything else?
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam?
How do we give a Godward turn or make an offering of the things that we, or people that we dislike? I mean, is it by maybe saying the mantra at those moments, or what are some of the techniques we can use to give a Godward turn?
The first thing is to just offer the emotions and perceptions themselves to the divine. Saying, these are your gunas. These moods, these feelings, these aversions, these attachments to negative feelings, they are thine. And so offer them. And then replace your thoughts with your mantra. Your mantra is your strongest, your most powerful tool for calming the mind and relieving it of these things. But sometimes it's very hard. Swami Prabhavananda said, sometimes the world presses on us so hard and the mind is so restless that we must go somewhere where no one can hear us and shout our mantra. He said those words. And because otherwise we just can't make it stick. So we have to go someplace where no one can hear us and shout our mantra. Christopher Isherwood used to go under train trestles and shout his mantra, because he was such a passionate person.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hey, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for the discussion and everyone else for sharing. I just
Mhm.
had two comments or observations. You know, one was based on some of the comments I think Justine and Cindy were talking about the situations, and it made me think of a line from Anthony DeMello's book, Awareness, where he said, when you feel, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it's like when you feel like you're going insane, you are on the verge of either becoming a lunatic or a mystic.
I love that.
Yeah, and so yeah, I have sought a lot of solace from that line because yeah, there have been many times where I've kind of it's like a sine curve, you know, I've kind of gone up and down between the two.
Oh yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Liam. That's what that you said. There were two things. Is that
No, that was the one thing that came up as a result of the conversation. The other thing, which was my initial thought, was from your discussion when you were talking about the desk, you know, and the ownership of the desk, and
right?
Yeah, it reminds me of I guess a analogy or parable of how the you know, the prisoner and the jailer are both equally imprisoned, and they're bound to each other because the jailer cannot, you know, his duty is to make sure the prisoner stays in place. So he's just, or they, you know, he or she is just as imprisoned as the jailer. So it just made me think of that.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. That's exactly right. So we have to be free of both conditions. Thank you, Liam.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I think as far as the, you know, how do we pass that grace on to the people we don't like, that I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the question. The only thing that helps me through that passage in my mind is realizing that Trump is still Shiva, Bernie is Shiva, we're all Shiva, whether you like them or not. Just some people don't know they are Shiva, and they are far from knowing, and that's the only difference.
And
we are all God, you know.
And Sri Krishna describes them very, very well in the chapter Divine and Demonic Tendencies in the Gita. What that condition of being far from that knowledge is like, and how it leads to a demonic condition. But as was pointed out in part by Jenny, that doesn't mean there's any separation. It just means that they're going to suffer far more greatly than the rest of us. And Krishna describes that suffering in that chapter, the divine and demonic tendencies. Yes, their knowledge, their being very far from the knowledge of God, we can see what it results in the way they behave. And you can just thank God and all of Providence that we are far from that. Thank you, Justine. You're right. Anyone else? All right then. Well, thank you for staying, all of you who did, and certainly those who had to leave. I'm sure they had to leave for good reason, so bless them. And we'll close with this. Om Sato Ma Satkamaya, Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritangamaya, Abir Moiti, O dearly beloved, lead us from thy lesser truth to thy highest truth. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. So have a splendid afternoon, everyone. May the Swami's words and their shining radiance, their beneficent effect persist in us and calm us and bring us grace through the rest of this day and this weekend. See those of you who can make it tomorrow morning, 11 o'clock, a bhakta's response to transformation. How a bhakti yogi responds to transformation. Until then, namaste.
Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Brother Shankar.
Thank you, dear. See you soon.
Shankar, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.